The road to the Ridge property was barely a road at all. It was a scarred ribbon of earth that wound its way up the hillside, slick with 3 days of relentless rain and neglected by the county. Amy Fleming fought the steering wheel of her truck, her knuckles white, her jaw set in a line of grim determination. The vehicle bucked and slid, the tires spinning for purchase in the muck, throwing rooster tails of dark sludge against the wheel wells. She didn't care about the mud. She didn't care about the suspension. She was driven by a singular burning need to put a face to the voice that was destroying her life. Mrs. Gagan had been clear. The neighbor, the woman in the rental property. Amy crested the hill. The rental house emerged from the gloom of the storm like a fortress of solitude. It was a modern renovation, sharp angles, black siding, floor-to-ceiling glass that usually reflected the sprawling beauty of the valley. Now, it reflected only the gray, churning sky. Amy killed the engine. She sat there for a moment, staring at the house. It was dark. The single yellow light she had seen from the Heartland office window was gone, extinguished as if it had never existed. The house looked dormant, a sleek, expensive shell sitting in the middle of nowhere. She opened the door and stepped out. The wind up here was ferocious, unimpeded by the trees that sheltered the valley floor. It whipped her hair across her face and stung her cheeks with icy needles of rain. She slammed the truck door shut, the sound echoing flatly against the siding of the house. She marched up the slate walkway. She reached the front door, a massive slab of stained oak, and raised her fist.
Hello? Is anybody here?
She waited. She expected footsteps. She expected a curtain to twitch. She expected the concerned neighbor to open the door with a feigned smile and an offer of tea, ready to deny everything. But there was nothing. The house swallowed her knock. Amy pounded again, harder this time, pain radiating up her forearm. Silence. Just the wind whistling through the decorative architectural slats near the roofline. Amy stepped back, frustration boiling over into desperation. She moved off the porch, tramping through the wet landscaping mulch to peer into the living room window. She cupped her hands around her face, pressing against the cold glass to block out the reflection. Inside, the house was a tomb of beige perfection. She saw a white sectional sofa that looked like it had never known the weight of a human body. She saw a glass coffee table with nothing on it. No coasters, no magazines, no dust. The kitchen in the background was pristine, the counters gleaming and empty. There were no personal items, no coat thrown over a chair, no boots by the door, no half-drunk cup of coffee. It looked like a showroom, frozen in time, waiting for a buyer who never arrived. Amy moved to the next window, the dining room, empty. She ran around to the back of the house, her boots sliding in the wet grass. The back patio was deserted. The patio furniture was covered in heavy canvas tarps strapped down for the season.
Is anyone here?
She screamed at the house. Her voice sounded small and hysterical in the vast emptiness of the ridge. She felt a cold prickle of doubt crawling up her spine. Giggling had been so sure, the woman in the rental property. But looking at this place, it was clear no one had lived here for months. There was no trash in the bins. There were no tire tracks in the driveway other than her own. Amy stopped, breathing hard. She felt disoriented. Had she imagined the light? Was she going crazy? The stress of the last few days, Jack's heart attack, the empty barn, the bills, was it making her hallucinate enemies, where there were only empty rooms? She backed away from the house, wiping the rain from her eyes. She felt foolish. She felt exposed. She had come here ready for a fight, and she was fighting a ghost. She scrambled back into her truck, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. She needed confirmation. She couldn't trust her own eyes anymore. She drove back down the ridge. But instead of turning left toward Heartland, she turned right. Half a mile down the road was the Miller place. Old Mr. Miller sat on his porch, rain or shine, watching the road. If anyone had been coming or going from the rental, he would know. She pulled into his driveway. Mr. Miller was there, sitting in his rocking chair behind the screen of his enclosed porch, wrapped in a blanket. Amy ran up the steps, dripping wet.
Mr. Miller.
The old man looked up, startled. He lowered his newspaper. Mr. Miller, Amy? What's wrong? Is it Jack?
No, Jack is the same, Mr. Miller, the rental house, up on the ridge, the modern one. Have you seen anyone up there?
Mr. Miller frowned, scratching his chin. Mr. Miller, no, not since the summer folks left in August. Amy gripped the railing.
Are you sure? No cars? No women coming or going?
Mr. Miller, I watched this road all day, Amy. Ain't been a car up there in weeks. Until you just went up. Amy felt the blood drain from her face.
But a client told me a neighbor was talking to her, a woman who lives there.
Mr. Miller looked at her with pity. It was the same look the truck driver had given her, the look reserved for someone who was cracking under pressure. Mr. Miller, wrong information, I think. Amy turned and walked back to her truck. She felt a profound sense of isolation. The world was gaslighting her. Someone was destroying her business, quoting her insurance policies and her mortgage rates, and yet that person apparently didn't exist. She sat in the cab, shivering violently. The heater blasted warm air, but she couldn't feel it. If there was no neighbor, then who was it? Who knew everything? The paranoia bloomed in her chest, dark and suffocating. Maybe it wasn't an outsider. Maybe it was an insider. Maybe the calls were coming from inside the house. She put the truck in gear. She had to pick up Lindy from school. But as she drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror at the ridge. The house was dark, but the feeling of being watched, of being targeted, was stronger than ever. The emptiness wasn't a comfort. It was a threat. It meant the enemy was invisible, and you can't fight what you can't see. The parking lot of Hudson Elementary was a chaotic sea of idling cars and minivans, a parade of red taillights blurring in the mist. Amy Fleming sat in her truck, gripping the steering wheel, her eyes scanning the flood of children pouring out of the double doors. She felt invisible, or rather, she felt hypervisible in the wrong way. Every time a parent glanced at her truck at the faded Heartland logo on the door, she felt a prickle of shame. Did they know? Had the neighbor called them too? Amy lowered her head slightly, pulling her ball cap down. She wasn't ready to make small talk. She wasn't ready to answer questions about Jack or the sudden convoy of transport trucks that had left her property yesterday. She just wanted to get her daughter and retreat behind the gates of the ranch. The passenger door was wrenched open. A gust of cold wind and the smell of wet asphalt swirled into the cab. Lindy climbed in. She didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She tossed her backpack onto the floor with a violence that startled Amy, then crossed her arms over her chest, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Her hair was damp, plastering to her forehead, but she didn't make a move to wipe it away. Amy put the truck in gear, eager to leave the gauntlet of judging eyes.
Hey, sweetie. How was school? Did you turn in that art project?
Lindy didn't answer immediately. She watched the windshield wipers slice back and forth, hypnotized by the motion. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, flat, and laced with a bitterness that sounded far too old for a 10-year-old. I hate it there. Amy merged into the line of traffic, her heart sinking.
You hate school? Since when? You love art class.
I don't want to go back.
Why? Did something happen? Was it the math test?
Lindy turned her head slowly. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She looked at her mother with a terrifying level of scrutiny. Sophie told everyone that Heartland is dead. Amy's foot slipped on the accelerator. The truck jerked forward slightly before she corrected.
What?
Sophie. She said her dad told her mom that you guys are broke. She said that the bank is going to come and put a lock on the gate and we're going to have to live in the truck. Amy felt the blood drain from her face. It was one thing for Mrs. Higgins to know. It was another thing for the poison to reach the playground.
Lindy, that is not true. Sophie doesn't know what she's talking about. People like to make up stories when they're bored.
Then why did Max say Grandpa is going to die and the bank will put a lock on our house? The question hung in the cab, sucking out the oxygen.
Excuse me.
Max, he said. His mom works at the hospital, and she said, Grandpa's heart exploded, and he's never coming home. Amy slammed on the brakes as they reached a stop sign, the tires skidding slightly on the wet pavement. She turned to face her daughter. She wanted to scream. She wanted to drive back to the school and shake Max's mother. The cruelty of it, the way the town was dissecting their tragedy for entertainment, was nauseating.
Lindy, look at me. Grandpa is sick, yes, but he is fighting, and nobody did it. It was a medical emergency. Do you understand? People are just, they're mean.
Lindy didn't look convinced. She looked defeated. She looked like a child who had spent 6 hours defending her family and had lost every battle. I don't want to go back. Everyone was staring at me. They looked at me like I was the poor kid now. Amy reached out to touch Lindy's hand, but Lindy pulled away, tucking her hands into her sleeves. The rejection stung, sharp and immediate. Amy turned back to the road, blinking back tears. She had failed to protect the business, and now she had failed to protect her daughter from the fallout. They drove the rest of the way in silence. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with unasked questions and unspoken accusations. As they turned off the highway and onto the Heartland driveway, the rain began to let up, leaving the world gray and stark. The iconic wooden archway loomed overhead, usually a symbol of welcome. Today, it felt like the entrance to a ruin. They crested the hill that overlooked the main yard. Usually, this was the moment where the view took your breath away, paddocks full of horses grazing, the bustle of staff, the life of the ranch. Today, it was a graveyard. Lindy looked out the window. Her eyes widened. The main jumper paddock, usually a riot of expensive blankets and sleek thoroughbreds, was empty. The mud was churned up, but there were no horses. She looked at the round pen. Empty. She looked at the hitching rail. Empty. The stillness was absolute. There were no grooms leading horses. There were no tractors running. It looked like the ranch had been abandoned in the middle of the night. The absence of the animals was a physical void, a gaping hole in the landscape. Lindy turned to Amy, panic flaring in her eyes. The rumors at school hadn't just been mean words. They were true. Where are they? Amy swallowed hard. She parked the truck in front of the house and killed the engine.
Oh, the clients just took them home for a bit. It's a quiet week. We're doing some deep cleaning in the barn. Stripping the stalls, fixing the mats. It's easier without the horses underfoot.
It was a terrible lie. Even as she said it, Amy knew it sounded ridiculous. You don't empty a premier boarding facility for spring cleaning. Lindy stared at the empty barn. She saw the dark windows. She saw the lack of hay nets. She remembered the massive trucks she had seen yesterday when she was peeking out her bedroom window. You're lying.
Lindy.
They left. They took them away because of what happened to Grandpa. Because we're bad luck.
No, honey. It's not bad luck. It's just business. Sometimes.
It's because of the screaming. Lindy unbuckled her seatbelt. She didn't wait for Amy. She shoved the door open and jumped out, her boots splashing in a puddle. She didn't run to the barn to check on her pony. She ran straight for the house, her backpack bouncing against her spine. Amy sat in the driver's seat, watching her daughter flee. She saw the slump of Lindy's shoulders. She assumed Lindy was terrified that Jack was dying, that the empty barn was a sign of the end. She misses him, Amy thought. She's scared she's going to lose him like she lost Ty. Amy didn't realize that it wasn't just fear of death. It was shame. Lindy was ashamed of the failure. She was ashamed that her mother, the famous horse healer, had driven everyone away. Amy rested her forehead against the steering wheel. The solitude was complete now. The neighbor was a ghost. The clients were gone. And her daughter was running away from her. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to be the rock Nathan told her to be. She had to take Lindy to the hospital. Maybe seeing Jack, even weak as he was, would fix this. Maybe if Lindy saw him breathing, she would realize the kids at school were liars. Amy opened the truck door. The wind caught it, creaking the hinges. The sound echoed across the empty yard, lonely and hollow. "It's just a quiet week," she whispered to herself again, trying to make it true. Just a quiet week. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the familiar, sterilized landscape of the 4th floor. Amy Fleming stepped out, her hand hovering near Lindy's shoulder but not quite touching it. There was a magnetic field of tension around her daughter, a force field generated by playground rumors, and the terrifying silence of the empty barn that Amy didn't dare breach. Lindy walked ahead, her backpack straps gripped tight in her small fists. She moved with a singular purpose, her eyes fixed on the linoleum tiles, counting the steps to room 4. She wasn't running to her grandfather. She was marching toward the only truth she felt she could trust. The kids at school said he was dying. Her mother said he was fine. Lindy needed to see the body to know which lie was the truth. Amy trailed behind, feeling like a ghost haunting her own life. The air here was different than at the ranch. At Heartland, the air was currently thick with the smell of failure and abandonment. Here, it smelled of rubbing alcohol and managed decline. They reached the open nursing station. The head nurse looked up, her eyes flicking from Amy to Lindy. There was a flicker of hesitation. Children weren't always encouraged in the ICU. But seeing the desperation etched onto the little girl's face, the nurse simply nodded and looked back at her screen. It was a small mercy in a week devoid of them. Amy stopped at the threshold of the room. The door was open this time. The glass partition that had separated her from Jack yesterday, the glass that had reflected her own guilt back at her, was slid back. The room was dim, lit mostly by the glow of the monitors and a small reading lamp clamped to the bedside table. And there was Lisa. Amy's breath hitched. She had expected to see Lisa sitting in the chair, holding Jack's hand, perhaps reading a book or sleeping. She had expected the vigil of a grieving wife. She hadn't expected a war room. Lisa had transformed the cramped corner of the ICU room into a makeshift executive office. The bedside tray table, meant for hospital food, was covered in stacks of paper invoices, ledgers, and breeding contracts. Her laptop was open, the screen casting a harsh blue light onto her face. Lisa looked wrecked. Her usually immaculate blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun, strands escaping to frame a face that looked 10 years older than it had a week ago. She wasn't wearing her signature pearls. She was wearing a wrinkled blouse and reading glasses perched precariously on her nose. She wasn't holding Jack's hand. She was holding a phone to her ear, pinned between her shoulder and her cheek, while she furiously highlighted a line on a document. "No, I can't accept that price. The Fairfield line is premium. If you want the straw, it's $5,000. I don't care what the market is doing. I need the liquidity by Friday." Amy stood frozen in the doorway. Friday. The words floated out of the room like smoke signals. Lisa was selling. She was haggling. She was liquidating assets from her own stud farm, Fairfield, right here in the room where her husband lay fighting for his life. Amy's eyes traveled from Lisa to the stack of papers. Even from this distance, The logos were clear. Hudson General Billing Department. Urgent notice. Payment past due. The realization hit Amy with the force of a physical blow to the stomach. It wasn't just that the ranch was losing money. It was that the ranch had no money. The medical bills, the cost of the ambulance, the ICU, the specialists, the drugs keeping Jack's heart rhythm stable were astronomical. And Heartland couldn't pay them. Lisa was paying them. Lisa was stripping her own business for parts, selling off breeding rights and assets in a desperate fire sale, just to keep the machines beeping. Amy felt a wave of nausea. She looked at Jack. He was asleep, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm dictated by the monitors. Lisa was funding. He looked so fragile, so removed from the chaos. He had no idea that his wife was bleeding herself dry to keep him there. And he had no idea that his granddaughter, the miracle girl, had let it happen. Did this, Amy thought. The thought wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a scream. She had chased away the clients. She had let the stress fester until it stopped Jack's heart. And now, she was standing empty-handed, while Lisa Stillman cleaned up the mess. Amy felt a sudden, crushing sense of smallness. She wasn't the rock. She wasn't the hero. She was a liability. Lisa hung up the phone. She let out a long, ragged sigh, taking off her glasses and rubbing her eyes. She looked exhausted, her posture slumping, now that the call was over. She looked at the pile of bills with a mixture of hatred and fear. She tore a check out of her personal book and clipped it to the hospital invoice. It was a mechanical motion, one she had clearly repeated dozens of times this week. Amy wanted to run. She wanted to grab Lindy and flee the hospital, flee the country, go find Lou and beg for forgiveness. The guilt was suffocating. It felt like the room was filled with water and she was the only one without gills. But she couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot by the sheer magnitude of her failure. She had thought the empty barn was the bottom. She was wrong. This was the bottom watching her step-grandmother sell her legacy to pay for Amy's mistakes. Lindy, oblivious to the financial tragedy unfolding in the corner, took a hesitant step into the room. Her sneakers squeaked on the floor. Lisa's head snapped up. Her eyes were sharp, defensive, ready to fight another billing administrator or a low-balling buyer. But when she saw Lindy, the mask crumbled. The hard, negotiating businesswoman vanished, replaced instantly by the grandmother. Her face softened, though the lines of exhaustion remained deep and etched. She didn't look at Amy. Her gaze slid right over Amy as if she were made of glass, fixing entirely on the child. But Amy saw the briefest flash in Lisa's eyes before they moved away. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. It was a weary, heavy judgment that said, "Look what you have reduced us to." Amy stepped back into the shadows of the hallway. Unable to bear the weight of that look, she felt like a contagion. She had ruined the peace of the ranch. She had ruined her grandfather's health. And now, she was ruining Lisa's financial future. Regret tasted like bile in her throat. She leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene unfold, an outsider looking in on the family she had destroyed. Lisa moved faster than she had moved in days. The moment her eyes locked onto Lindy, the exhaustion that had been weighing her down seemed to evaporate, replaced by a fierce, protective instinct. She stood up from her makeshift desk, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, and crossed the small room in 2 strides. "Lindy, oh, sweetheart." She didn't just walk over, she swooped. She dropped to her knees right there on the hospital floor, ignoring the hard tile, and pulled Lindy into her arms. It was a desperate embrace, a grandmother trying to shield a child from the ugly reality of the world. Lindy stiffened for a split second, then crumbled. She buried her face in Lisa's shoulder, her small hands clutching the back of Lisa's wrinkled blouse. She didn't cry loud, sobbing tears. She just held on, shaking slightly, as if Lisa were the only solid thing in a liquid world. "I've got you. It's okay." Grandpa is right here. Amy took a step forward from the doorway. Her instinct was to join them, to make this a family moment. She wanted to kneel down too. She wanted to touch Lindy's back, to touch Lisa's arm, to be part of the circle.
She really wanted to see him. She heard some things at school.
Lisa didn't look up. She didn't acknowledge Amy's voice. It was as if Amy hadn't spoken at all. Lisa kept her face buried in Lindy's hair, rocking her gently. Don't you listen to anyone else, darling. You listen to me. He's been waiting for you. Lisa pulled back, framing Lindy's face with her hands. She wiped a stray tear from the girl's cheek with her thumb. Then she stood up, keeping a firm grip on Lindy's hand. Come, he's awake. Lisa turned her back on the door. She led Lindy toward the bed. She didn't invite Amy. She didn't leave space for Amy. She used her body as a shield, effectively cutting off Amy's line of sight to Jack. Amy stood in the doorway, her hand half raised. The rejection was absolute. It wasn't a slammed door. It was a closed circle that she was no longer part of. They reached the bed. Jack was lying still, his eyes closed. He looked like he was made of gray paper. But as Lisa whispered his name, his eyes fluttered open. It took him a moment to focus. He looked at Lisa, confusion clouding his gaze. Then he looked down. He saw the top of Lindy's head. The transformation was heartbreaking. The lines of pain around his mouth smoothed out. His eyes, usually so dull with sedation, sparked with a faint blue light. He didn't look away. He didn't cover his ears.
Well, look who it is.
Lindy let out a small, choked sound. She reached out and took his hand. The hand that was covered in tape and ivy lines. Hi, Grandpa. Jack squeezed her fingers. It was a weak grip, barely a flutter. But it was there. He smiled. It was a lopsided, tired smile, but it was full of love. It was the smile he had denied Amy.
You skipping school?
Lindy managed a wet, shaky laugh. Yeah.
Good girl. Never liked that place anyway.
Amy watched from the corridor. She was gripping the door frame so hard her fingernails were digging into the wood. She saw the love in the room. She saw the connection. It was a warm, golden light, and she was standing in the cold, gray hallway. She realized then that she was the contaminate. When she entered the room, Jack turned away. When she entered the room, Lisa became a bill-paying machine. But when Lindy entered, they became a family again. I am the stress, she thought. I am the one breaking them. Lisa looked up then. She looked over Lindy's head, straight through the open door, and met Amy's eyes. There was no invitation in that look. There was only a silent command. Let them have this. Do not ruin this. Amy nodded, a microscopic movement. She stepped back. She slid the glass door closed. The sound was final. The muffled voices inside were cut off, replaced by the hum of the hallway. Amy stood there for a moment, watching through the glass. It was a silent movie now. She saw Jack whisper something to Lindy. She saw Lisa stroke Jack's forehead. It was a tableau of everything she had lost. She wiped her face with her sleeve. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, hard resolve. She looked at the billing papers. Lisa had left on the tray table inside. She looked at the empty hallway. I won't beg, she whispered to the glass. I'll fix it. She will go back to the empty barn. She will go back to the silent house. She's going to work until her hands bled, until she found new clients, until she earned the money to pay Lisa back every single cent. She would rebuild Heartland brick by brick if she had to, alone in the dark, because that was the only way she would ever get back on the other side of that glass.